1 in 3 Americans now lives in a state where taxes have risen faster than their wages. It's not a number on a form, it's a slow bleeding of entire communities. Main streets once alive with family-run shops are quiet now, their open signs fading behind layers of for sale notices. Every year that passes, budgets grow fatter while dreams grow thinner. The tax burden is no longer about revenue, it's about survival. Across Illinois, California, New York, families are packing trucks not because they want to leave, but because they can't afford to stay. Some are retirees watching decades of savings evaporate in property tax bills larger than their mortgages. Others are young couples who did everything right and still end each month with nothing left. In this video, we'll uncover the 10 U.S. states collapsing under the crushing weight of taxes. Places where rising levies, pension debts, and runaway budgets are driving families, retirees, and small businesses to the brink. Stay until we reach number 3, the state economists call the next Illinois, where pension debt and property taxes have pushed whole towns to the edge of bankruptcy. Because this isn't just about money, it's about the quiet collapse of the American promise. Illinois, the state with the highest property tax burden in America, where the average homeowner now pays nearly $8,000 a year just to keep the roof above their head. In 2010, the typical bill was closer to $5,000. 15 years later, it has climbed by more than 50%, while wages have barely moved. For every $100 a family earns in Illinois, almost 15 now vanish into state and local taxes, the second heaviest load in the nation. But numbers alone don't capture the exhaustion. They don't show the mother in Rockford staring at another reassessment letter, the farmer outside Peoria calculating whether his land can survive one more season, or the retired teacher in Naperville who sold the home her husband built because the tax bill was higher than their pension check. Across the state, schools close even as tax rates rise. Public pensions devour nearly 1 out of every $4 in the budget. The state's unfunded liability now exceeds $500 billion, a debt so deep it could swallow every remaining small town twice over. Downtown Chicago, once the symbol of Midwest prosperity, is quietly hollowing out. Office towers sit half empty. Property values have dropped by nearly 30% since the pandemic. And yet, local governments, desperate to fill the gap, keep raising levies on those who stay behind. Each increase pushes another business to Indiana, another family to Tennessee, another retirement dream out of reach. Illinois has become the cautionary tale of what happens when government promises outrun the taxpayers who fund them. The weight isn't just financial, it's emotional. It's the feeling of being punished for trying to build a life, of watching the home you worked for become a liability instead of a legacy. And what's happening in Illinois isn't unique. Just south and west, another state, once considered the golden engine of America, is watching the same fiscal storm roll in. Its budgets are bloated, its taxes relentless, and its families are quietly leaving before the next increase hits. Because Illinois was only the beginning. California, once the land of golden dreams, now a state where the sun still shines, but the math no longer works. Here, the highest top income tax rate in the country, 13.3%, collides with a cost of living already breaking records. For millions, it's a tax they can no longer afford to pay. In 2010, California's state budget hovered near $90 billion. Today, it's more than $300 billion, and still running deficits that stretch into the tens of billions. To close the gap, lawmakers keep reaching for the same lever: higher taxes, new fees, another bite from those still hanging on. Middle-class families in San Diego now spend nearly half their income just on housing and state taxes combined. In Los Angeles, small business owners say they're being taxed to death, not just income, but gas, vehicles, utilities, and everything in between. A gallon of fuel carries nearly 70 cents in state taxes alone, the highest in America. Every mile driven has become a luxury. And while the wealthy can relocate their assets, the working and middle class cannot. Over the past 3 years, California has lost more than 1 million residents to outmigration, the largest population decline in its history. They're moving to Arizona, Texas, Idaho, anywhere their paychecks will stretch past the 15th of the month. Meanwhile, the state's pension obligations now top $400 billion, a shadow debt that keeps growing even as revenues shrink. Local governments, already strapped by wildfire costs and housing programs, quietly raise property taxes to fill holes the state leaves behind. In some coastal counties, homeowners now pay upwards of $12,000 a year in combined levies. The result is a quiet unraveling. Downtown San Francisco's vacancy rate has climbed past 30%. Entire office blocks sit dark after sundown. And yet, even as businesses close and workers flee, Sacramento finds new ways to tax the few still standing. California has become the paradox of modern America, the richest state in the union, yet home to the highest poverty-adjusted rate in the nation. A place where ambition meets bureaucracy, and both collapse under their own weight. And just beyond its borders lies another state where the same story is starting to unfold, a place long known for wealth, finance, and power, now drowning under a different kind of tax burden. Because if California is the warning, that state is the proof. New York. Once the symbol of American ambition, now a state weighed down by taxes so heavy even Wall Street is starting to flinch. Here, the cost of staying isn't just measured in dollars, it's measured in hours of labor, in empty storefronts, in the silence that follows when another business gives up. The combined state and city income tax rate for top earners now exceeds 14%, the highest in the country when local surcharges are counted. For middle-income families, it's not much better. Property taxes in suburban counties like Westchester and Nassau routinely surpass $15,000 a year, while the average renter in Manhattan pays more than half their income just to keep a roof overhead. Since 2020, more than 500,000 residents have left New York, the largest population drop of any state besides California. They're moving to Florida, the Carolinas, Pennsylvania, anywhere they can find sunlight, space, and a smaller tax bill. What's left behind is an economy fraying at the edges. New York City's office vacancy rate sits near record highs, with more than 90 million square feet now standing empty. Entire blocks in Midtown lie quiet after dark. And outside the five boroughs, small towns upstate tell the same story. Boarded up diners, silent factories, and the endless debate over how to fund another year of government spending that keeps growing even as the tax base shrinks. New York's budget has swelled to nearly $200 billion, more than the entire GDP of some countries, and still the state faces shortfalls. Public sector pension costs consume nearly 20% of payrolls. Every year, the legislature raises temporary taxes that never disappear, while counties quietly add new levies to close their own gaps. But the toll is more than fiscal. It's psychological. For generations, New York was the place you went to make it. Now, for many, it's the place you leave to stay afloat. Even lifelong New Yorkers, teachers, police officers, small business owners whisper about escape. The Empire State isn't collapsing all at once. It's eroding, building by building, paycheck by paycheck, until the ambition that once defined it becomes too expensive to sustain. And farther south lies a state that used to envy New York's wealth, a state that built its fortunes on tourism, real estate, and retirees. But now that prosperity has turned brittle, and its taxes are pushing its own middle class to the brink. Because when even the sunshine can't hide the debt, collapse isn't far behind. New Jersey, the small state with the biggest tax bill in America. Here, every block feels like it's carrying a mortgage on the government's mistakes. The average property tax rate stands above 2.5% of assessed value, the highest in the nation and still rising. For the typical homeowner, that means more than $9,000 a year just to keep the lights on in a house that's already losing value. In 2010, the median bill was $7,000. 15 years later, it's up by nearly a third, while incomes have barely moved. Salaries stagnate, assessments climb, and every time a town hall meets to rebalance budgets, the burden shifts again, always downward, always onto the families who can least afford it. Across Bergen and Essex counties, for sale, signs bloom like weeds each spring. Teachers, police officers, and postal workers, once the backbone of New Jersey's middle class, are now fleeing across the Delaware into Pennsylvania, where their property tax bills drop by half. Even retirees, who spent their lives saving in these communities, are packing up, forced out by annual increases that outpace their fixed incomes. The state's pension obligations hover around $100 billion. Local governments, drowning in costs, rely on some of the nation's highest school funding levies to stay solvent. More than 60% of every property tax dollar goes straight to education and pensions, not new teachers or repairs, but legacy promises. And the more residents leave, the fewer remain to shoulder what's left. Along the Jersey Shore, boarded-up shops sit behind summer rental banners that never came down. In Newark and Trenton, businesses close before dark to save on utilities and security. Even affluent suburbs are feeling the pressure, a quiet panic that the next reassessment will be the one that finally breaks them. New Jersey is America's warning label, a state that taxed itself into paralysis. The services haven't improved, the debt hasn't shrunk, the only thing growing is the bill. But just north and east, another state is discovering that even prosperity can turn poisonous when taxes start feeding on themselves. A state once called the insurance capital of America, now facing a fiscal reckoning of its own. Because if New Jersey is the cautionary tale, Connecticut is what happens next. Connecticut, once the quiet capital of wealth and insurance, now a state running out of both. For decades, it was the Gold Coast of America, stable, secure, untouchable. But today, even the gold is taxed. The state income tax rate, first passed as a temporary fix, now reaches nearly 7% for middle earners, higher for top incomes. Property taxes average 2.1%, fifth highest in the nation, and in cities like Hartford, New Haven, and Bridgeport, home ownership feels like a luxury subscription that never ends. Since 2010, Connecticut's debt has swelled past $60 billion, about 15% of residents' total personal income, the worst debt-to-income ratio in America. Each budget cycle brings the same ritual: new deficits, new taxes, and more residents quietly meeting with financial planners and tax advisory specialists to relocate their wealth before the next increase hits. Fairfield County, once filled with Manhattan commuters, is losing its high-income earners. Each departure takes with it property, sales, and income tax revenue, along with retirement accounts, investment portfolios, and insurance policies. Hartford teeters near insolvency. Its bond rating hovers just above junk. To keep services running, towns raise mill rates again, squeezing the homeowners who remain. The spiral is financial and psychological. Tax revenues feed pension promises instead of roads. Bridges rust, schools leak, and trains that once symbolized mobility now symbolize decay. Even major insurance and wealth management firms are moving headquarters to states with friendlier corporate tax structures. In New Haven, property tax bills rise faster than home values. In Bridgeport, small business owners juggle utilities, taxes, and payroll, never all three at once. Many now seek debt consolidation or financial relief programs just to stay solvent. And in Hartford's hollow downtown, lights flicker on timers, not people. Connecticut has become the story of what happens when a wealthy state forgets how it built its wealth. Its past was production, its present is paperwork. Every new tax, passed to fill a hole, only digs another. Even retirement advisors and real estate investors now warn clients, the numbers no longer make sense. Just up the coast lies a state following the same path, one with booming biotech and elite universities, now watching its taxpayers quietly pack up. Because if Connecticut is the warning, Massachusetts is the next chapter. Massachusetts, the birthplace of the American Revolution, now facing a quieter one of its own. For decades, this state was a symbol of intellect, innovation, and wealth. But beneath the polished campuses and biotech towers, a financial rebellion is brewing. When the so-called millionaire's tax passed in 2023, it promised to fund schools and infrastructure. Instead, it triggered an exodus of the very people it was designed to tax. Top earners now face a combined state and federal rate approaching 40%, pushing thousands of small business owners, retirees, and professionals to relocate to New Hampshire and Florida, states with no income tax at all. Property taxes in Greater Boston average more than $7,000 a year. In some suburbs, assessments have jumped 20% in just 2 years. For homeowners on fixed incomes, it feels less like community support and more like a slow eviction notice. At the same time, the cost of living in Boston has soared to record highs. Families are spending more than half their take-home pay on housing, taxes, and utilities. Financial advisors now warn that Massachusetts' tax climate rivals California's, and that retirement portfolios and small business profits are eroding faster than inflation. Since the new tax law took effect, Migration data shows net losses in high-income households, those earning over $200,000 a year. Wealth management firms report a surge in clients seeking tax relocation strategies and retirement planning outside the state. Meanwhile, the state budget has ballooned beyond $60 billion, yet officials project another deficit for the next fiscal year. Downtown Boston is showing cracks beneath its historic charm. Commercial vacancies in the financial district have doubled since the pandemic. Restaurants once packed with office workers now sit half-empty, and business owners whisper about the death of downtown. For many lifelong residents, the frustration runs deeper than numbers. It's the feeling that loyalty is punished, that the very success the state once celebrated has become a taxable offense. Every policy meant to raise revenue seems to push prosperity further away. Massachusetts stands at a crossroads between its legacy as the cradle of independence and its future as one of America's most expensive places to live. And far across the continent, another state is discovering that low taxes aren't a birthright, they're a choice. A place that once prided itself on independence and progressivism now finds its small businesses gasping for air under a new wave of corporate and income taxes. Because what's happening in Massachusetts today, Oregon is beginning to feel tomorrow. Oregon, a state that once sold itself as a refuge from the chaos of the coasts. No sales tax, clean air, a slower pace of life. But the math behind that promise no longer works. When Oregon introduced its corporate activity tax in 2020, it was meant to stabilize school funding. Instead, it's strangling small businesses, taxing not profits, but gross receipts. For companies already fighting inflation, that means paying taxes even when they lose money. Now, Oregon ranks among the top 10 most expensive states for entrepreneurs to operate in, and the exodus has begun. The top income bracket sits near 10%, one of the highest in the nation. That number alone drives out retirees, freelancers, and remote workers, people who can relocate without losing clients. Since 2021, Oregon has lost more than 60,000 taxpayers to neighboring states like Idaho and Washington, taking billions in future revenue with them. And yet, the state budget keeps ballooning up nearly 40% in just 5 years. Government spending is growing faster than the population or economy. The shortfalls are filled not by reform, but by new tax proposals and bond issuances that promise temporary relief while piling up long-term debt. Meanwhile, homeowners are caught in a different kind of squeeze. Property taxes, capped in the 90s, now lag far behind, soaring assessments, leaving local governments broke and desperate. Cities like Portland and Eugene are quietly layering new public safety and infrastructure fees on water, trash, and electricity bills, hidden taxes by another name. The results are visible on every corner of downtown Portland. Empty storefronts, help wanted signs, collecting dust. A quarter of small retailers say they're one tax hike away from closing. Even tech workers, once the backbone of Oregon's Silicon Forest, are moving out, citing the state's tax burden and declining quality of life. Financial planners now warn clients that Oregon's combined tax structure, income, payroll, and business activity is among the least favorable in the West. For every dollar earned, nearly 14 cents disappear into taxes, fees, and assessments. Oregon's great paradox is that it tried to tax its way into prosperity. Now it's taxing away the very people who made it prosperous. And far north, another state is discovering that its progressive ideals come with the same price, a place where high taxes and cold winters are pushing families and retirees toward the exits. Because Oregon's future may already be visible in Minnesota. Minnesota, the land of 10,000 lakes and 10,000 taxes. A place where the scenery remains beautiful, but the math behind everyday life no longer adds up. For decades, Minnesota was the economic anchor of the upper Midwest, home to manufacturing, healthcare, and Fortune 500 companies. But today, its taxpayers face one of the highest income tax burdens in America. The top bracket sits at 9.85%, rivaling California's without the weather or the wages to offset it. The cost of staying here is growing unbearable. A middle-class household in Minneapolis now pays more than $15,000 a year in combined state, local, and property taxes, while wages have barely kept up with inflation. And for retirees, it's worse. Until recently, Minnesota taxed Social Security income, a policy so unpopular that even longtime residents called it a retirement repellent. Though partially repealed, it came too late. Thousands of retirees have already fled south to Florida, Arizona, and South Dakota, taking billions in retirement income, investment capital, and insurance premiums with them. The state's budget has ballooned past $60 billion, a 40% jump in less than a decade. Spending is up, the population is flat. To cover shortfalls, lawmakers continue to expand fees, gas taxes, and payroll levies, even as families cut back on essentials. Local governments are following the same pattern, hiking property taxes across the Twin Cities suburbs at record pace. Financial planners now warn clients that Minnesota is one of the least tax-efficient states for retirees and business owners. Wealth management firms and relocation specialists report sharp increases in clients looking to shift assets or establish residency elsewhere. Some employers are even offering remote workers relocation stipends to move across the border into Wisconsin or the Dakotas, simply to avoid Minnesota's tax code. Downtown Minneapolis tells the story in silence. Office towers stand half empty. The skyways that once buzzed with commuters now echo with footsteps and wind. Each empty desk represents another job, another taxpayer, lost to the state's own policies. Minnesota has become the cold warning of what happens when fiscal ambition outpaces economic reality. It's a state where success feels penalized, and where every winter seems a little longer, not because of the snow, but because of the bills. And to the east lies another state struggling with the same burden, one where dual city and state taxes weigh down every paycheck and drain every commuter's wallet. Because Minnesota's chill is already reaching Maryland. Maryland, the state that taxes the American dream twice. Once when you earn it, and again when you try to keep it. For generations, Maryland thrived on proximity to power, home to federal contractors, government agencies, and commuters who fueled one of the richest median incomes in the country. But today, that same closeness has become a curse. The combined weight of state, county, and city taxes now makes Maryland one of the most expensive places in America to draw a paycheck. Top earners face a combined income tax rate approaching 9%, while property taxes in counties like Montgomery and Prince George's climb higher each year. Even small business owners are caught in the web, facing both a state income tax and a local business levy on the same revenue. Financial advisors call it double taxation with interest. Commuters who drive into Washington, D.C., each day pay gas taxes and tolls that rank among the nation's highest. A 2-hour round trip means burning both fuel and savings. For many families, the tax burden has turned the dream of suburban life into an equation that no longer balances. Maryland's state budget has soared past $65 billion, a record high. Government payrolls continue to expand, even as the private sector contracts. Meanwhile, the state's pension obligations exceed $100 billion, quietly draining billions from education, healthcare, and infrastructure. Middle-income households are the hardest hit. They make too much to qualify for relief, yet too little to absorb the increases. In counties surrounding Baltimore, retirement planners and relocation consultants report a steady uptick in clients seeking to move south to Delaware, Virginia, or the Carolinas, where taxes take less of every paycheck. Downtown Baltimore bears the scars of a shrinking tax base. Vacant office towers reflect empty streets, closed restaurants line the harbor. Each empty storefront is more than lost rent. It's lost revenue for a state addicted to spending. Maryland has become the paradox of prosperity, a state rich on paper, poor in momentum. It collects more than most and keeps less than ever. Even wealth managers and financial analysts now warn clients that Maryland's fiscal model is unsustainable without reform. And across the ocean, on islands known for beauty and escape, another state faces the same burden, a paradise where paradise itself has become unaffordable. Because if Maryland shows what happens when taxes smother ambition, Hawaii shows what happens when they smother hope. Hawaii, a paradise so beautiful that people forget it's collapsing in slow motion. The islands have always sold a dream: endless beaches, ocean breezes, a simple life untouched by the mainland's chaos. But beneath the palm trees and postcards, a financial crisis has been quietly building, one tax at a time. Hawaii's cost of living is the highest in the United States. Its combined state and local tax burden now exceeds 12% of income and still rising. Nearly everything is taxed: food, fuel, shipping, hotels, and even medical care. The state's general excise tax, first introduced decades ago, at a fraction of a percent, now hits 4.5% on almost every transaction, from groceries to rent. It doesn't sound like much until you realize it compounds at every step of the supply chain. For a family of 4 in Honolulu, the annual tax load rivals that of New York or California, but without the mainland's higher wages. Gas prices average more than $5 a gallon, with almost 70 cents of that going to state taxes and fees. Electricity rates are triple the national average. Everything costs more because everything must be shipped, stored, and taxed again before it reaches the shelf. Small business owners call it the tax of distance. Each new surcharge, port fee, or regulatory cost ripples through the economy like a wave. Some have started consulting financial planners and business relocation advisors, not for growth, but for survival. Even retirees are leaving. In 2024 alone, more than 10,000 residents, many living on fixed incomes, relocated to the mainland. Hawaii's pension liabilities top $20 billion, and its state budget continues to climb past $12 billion despite stagnant population growth. To plug shortfalls, lawmakers introduce new temporary levies that never seem to disappear. Wealth managers and tax advisors warn that the state's dependence on tourism taxes is a fragile model, one recession or natural disaster away from collapse. For those who stay, paradise now comes with a price. Each sunset feels like a luxury, each grocery bill a reminder. And when residents talk about leaving, they no longer whisper, they plan. Hawaii remains breathtaking, but beauty doesn't pay the bills. It is the perfect ending to America's great tax paradox, the place where dreams cost the most, and hope is taxed on the way out. Across these 10 states, from the empty offices of Chicago to the taxed sunsets of Honolulu, one truth echoes louder than any slogan. The American dream has become a bill. Too many can no longer pay. Families are leaving not because they want to, but because the math no longer works. Budgets rise, wages stall, and every promise written on paper feels heavier in reality. We've watched cities hollow out, small businesses vanish, and retirees uproot everything they built just to breathe again. The story isn't about greed, it's about survival. And as each state searches for revenue, what's really collapsing isn't their economies, but the quiet faith that hard work should be enough. Because when ambition is punished and stability is taxed, even the most loyal citizens start packing. This is what happens when the price of paradise becomes unaffordable, not just in Hawaii, but in every corner of a nation now counting the cost of its own prosperity.